In my 15 years of building web applications, I quite recently just discovered vertical slice architecture, and today I want to share a simple example with you how to use vertical slice architecture in a Blazor server application. So let's dive right in after hitting that like button. So what I want to do is simply create a new project, and as I said, it should be a Blazor web app using the server interactive render mode because most of the time that's all you need. So let's call this thing Blazor server VSA, and of course it is about games, so game DB, something like that. Now, when this is built, you will see the default stuff, right? Let's just add server as interactive render mode here. We could also start with none if you're not familiar with that, static server-side rendering, and add server manually. But let's just start right away with Blazor server, and then you will see here in the Solution Explorer default stuff, right? Now, if you would want to use a clean architecture, for instance, then you would have to add a couple of more projects, class libraries, stuff like that for all the layers. You know the drill. Maybe if not, check out my other video about clean architecture or the .NET Web Academy. But now regarding vertical slice architecture, what I want to do is I want to use feature folders. But let's start from the beginning. First thing is entity framework, because I want to show you every single detail step how I would build a simple CRUD application in essence, but we will only get games and edit games and also build the form for that with Blazor. So now here first, a new folder, and we call this folder data for entity framework stuff, and maybe also for the game entity. We could also use an entities folder. Maybe I will change my decision in a second. But now here, let's create our context, our game context, or simply the application DB context. So let's use the standard name app DB context. Maybe you could also call this game DB context, whatever you like. We will use entity framework here in a minute. And then another thing we need is the game entity. You can create again an entities folder for that, or let's just add it here real quick. So here now we have our game. Now let's implement the game real quick because this thing should be simple. First thing is an ID. Then I would like to add a string for the title. And the last one would be a string for the genre, like that. And by default, so we do not have the warning here, we just set this to string empty, and here same thing. All right, now this is our game. Now let's use this in our database. I want to use a SQL Server database. So what I want to do here is I inherit from DB context. This is the thing that we need when we want to use entity framework. Now with control and period, I open the quick fix menu here, and it is not suggesting to install entity framework, which is interesting, but now it is. So now you see install package Microsoft Entity Framework Core. Find and install the latest version, please. You saw this thing popping up here, really short, the using directive, or the reference. So, and then it was removed again. I don't know why. So let's just re-add this thing. And now boilerplate stuff, right? So what we need here, Copilot is actually suggesting already something, and I think this looks just fine. So let's just go with that. We have our app DB context constructor. It needs DB context or DB context options. Use the base constructor here, and also really important, the DB set, the games. This is the name of our table that will include all our games. All right. So let's use that one, and we can actually remove this. This is not really necessary. All right. So this is now our DB context, we have our game entity, and we also need default configurations here. So first in the app settings, let's add the connection string. Let me just copy and paste it. So here you see connection strings, default connection. I'm using SQL Server Express, available for free, so you can do that as well. Server, localhost, SQL Express, game DB VSA for vertical slice architecture, trusted connection true, and trust server certificate also true. All right, this is fine. Now, last boilerplate, I'd say, is the following. We want to register our DB context. So what we need in the program CS is builder services add DB context, and there it is already, thanks to Copilot, I think. So we want to register our app DB context. Let's add the reference real quick, and we have to give this thing options because Entity Framework needs to know what provider we want to use, and this would be SQL Server, but we need a package for that. So we will add this one in a sec, but as you can see here, use SQL Server and then the connection string, and for that we can use builder configuration get connection string default connection. So this configuration thingy here is our app settings JSON file in the end. SQL Server is necessary, the provider is necessary, so let's manage our NuGet packages real quick. And here I just enter SQL Server, and here now we see Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQL Server it is. There you see provider package for SQL Server and Azure SQL, by the way. So when you want to deploy this to Azure later, then you can keep this provider. It should work when you're using an Azure database. All right, this seemed to work. And there's also another package I want to use, and this would be the tools. Although when I prepared this, I already created the database, but let's do this together as well. So here are the tools. With that, we can use code first migrations. All right. And now I'd suggest we add the reference here real quick. And now let's make use of the migrations real quick. And with that, then the boilerplate stuff should be done. So add dash migration it is. Let's call this initial. And with that, we should get the migration file to add the, or to create the database and add the games table. It succeeded. This is great. And then we see here in our up method, which means when we want to apply this migration, the games table will be created with all the properties that we defined. And in the case we want to roll back the migration, with rolling back, we just drop the table. So let's now say update the database. Although it doesn't exist, it's still the update database command. Lots and lots of stuff is happening, but when we now go to Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio and refresh, because there are lots of databases. Come on, refresh. There it is. Databases also from the .NET Web Academy, like the time tracker, Blazing blog, and so on, or from the live sessions here on YouTube. Maybe you want to tune in sometime. But here, this is our database, GameDB VSA, right? So here now, we just right-click, edit top to 100 rows. We see no games so far, but boilerplate works. Let me just check this in here or commit this to Git. And of course, you can download the complete source code. Just check out the link in the video description to get it. So create and push. But now comes the more interesting part, right? Maybe you skipped to this part. Hello there, welcome. And now what we want to do is we want to use vertical slice architecture. And as I already said, I want to use a feature folder for that, because this is what you typically do with a vertical slice. You don't want to add layer after layer after layer. You have everything in one project, and then this vertical slice means that, for instance, for the edit game use case, for the edit game feature or get game by ID feature, you put somehow every layer into this one folder. In our case, that won't be a lot, but what we typically do is we use CQRS here. You don't have to use Mediator, right? But you can if you want to, but you don't have to. And then this means that you should have everything what you need inside a feature folder, right? In this case, when you do that, coupling is loose, similar to clean architecture, but cohesion is pretty high, meaning that everything that belongs together stays together in this one folder. So this is what I really love about vertical slice architecture. Just recently completed a complete project. It's great English. Completed a project which was a mini online course platform, let's say, similar to Udemy, for instance, but tiny, for a company, internal stuff. It was great experience. So I can really recommend that. Anyways, what I want to do now here, our feature folder. So features it is about our games. So let's create another folder called games. All right. And now down here, we have two options. What we can do is we can either create one file already for every use case, for instance, edit game, CS, then the get game by ID, update game, and so on. Or we create another folder for the feature, because it could be the case that we want to return specific DTOs, data transfer objects, right? And with that, then we don't put the DTO in another folder where we say, okay, these are our entities, these are our DTOs. What we want to do is we just put our DTOs also in this folder there. All right. So now let's add a new folder, edit game it is, and the first file now is our edit game CS. And in here now I will add a command and the corresponding handler, but let's also add another one, because these are, for this tutorial, I really try to make this small, this tutorial here. For a deeper dive, please comment below. Then I am more than happy to give you more deep dives into vertical slice architecture with Blazor, what I can really recommend. But now let's say get game by ID it is. And again, another file, new item, get game by ID. All right, now edit game. What you typically do is you make this thing static. All right, so with that, then we are able to use the commands and the handlers later or in a minute in our Blazor pages, which is really nice. But here now, first for the actual code, command is the following. So public record it is, and we can just call this command, which is nice because we are in this static class, right? We don't have to call this edit game command, for instance. So here now, what we need is actually an ID, a string, and a genre. And here's a typo. Oh my gosh. Why didn't you tell me? See, this is great about the live sessions, but now I have to use this. Otherwise, I would have to add another migration to change the name of the genre. But I want to spare you the time. Okay, no interface here because we're not using the mediator package, right? It's just our own stuff. So let's add the semicolon. And now here already add our handler. So public class handler it is with our app db context. Call this context using the primary constructor here. And now another method inside, which looks similar to the following. Yeah, but let me just write this myself. So async task handle it is. We use the command. For this example, we don't use the cancellation token. And here now, what I want to do is var game await context games find async command. This is, yeah, let's just have a look. So the first line looks okay. I think if the game is null, we can throw an exception. Why not Copilot? And then that's correct. What we want to do is we change the title and then save the changes asynchronously. All right, the genre. Who doesn't know the genre? Great. Okay, so this is our complete feature for editing the game. Again, CQRS in essence just means maybe you know typically your requests, right? You have a web API, for instance, you have a request to get something from a database or to change something in a database. And this is the differentiation you do with CQRS, meaning a query is something like a select on a database, right? You just get data, you read data, receive data, stuff like that. You cannot change something, you cannot destroy anything in a database. And this is why it's called a query, but a command, there you have to be careful. You can change something in the database. This is an edit, this is an update, a delete. These three are commands. This is why we use these terms here. Now let's really quick add the code for getting a game. And this looks like that. So quick question, we are only receiving data. Is this a query or a command? A query, correct. So now record query it is. Jesus, Copilot. All right. I really have to think about keeping Copilot enabled when I do these tutorials. Please tell me that in the comments. It would be interesting to know, do you want to see the suggestions of Copilot or not? And yeah, maybe in the live sessions, you can tell me that as well. But anyways, now Copilot suggested the query with an integer ID. This is totally correct. And we have our handler, but it, yeah, not using the primary constructor. I actually wanted to use a primary constructor here. So let's remove that stuff real quick. And now in our handle method, we get a game returned. All right, with the query, this is correct. And here now awaits context find with the ID. If it's null, all right, let's throw an exception. Why not? And return the game. Okay, this looks good to me. And now Blazor. Now this is interesting because there's in my head a real debate how you would do that. For this example, what I would do is here in the pages folder, I would create an edit page. All right, so let's add another folder for games. And then in here, I add another one because I just want to show you how this works real quick. A new item, edit razor. All right, so this is yeah, this looks good. Okay, so now here I will just add the edit form. But the thing is that I told you about cohesion, right? So everything that belongs together is close together. So this means, for instance, if we have an overview page for the games, right, where we see a table of all games, but again, I want to spare you the time, so I want to make this real quick here, then you would have one page similar to the current situation that you would put under pages, or you create another feature folder and then pages there, stuff like that, all right? But the actual edit form then again could be put in here, right, under the edit game folder. But then again, in this particular case, the edit page would use the edit game feature and also the get game by ID feature. All right, so this means that we actually need two features here, and this is why I decided to move this page then here to the games folder again, because we have an edit form there, but we use two features. What we could do now is, when the edit form is implemented, we could grab this as a separate component, maybe. But then again, we would have to be careful because we need stuff from our code block that probably is needed by both, or needs both features. I think you get the idea, right? So this is something where you have to be careful, or where you really have to think about when you are using vertical slice architecture. There are options to use components, make it clean and tidy, where you then put your stuff into the corresponding feature folders, or you have one overall page that needs several components, several pages, whatever it is. So then in this case, you would use it or put it there in another folder outside the feature folders with all the commands, queries, handlers, and so on. All right, now to the actual edit form. So here what we do is first add the page directive with edit id int. This looks nice, but let me make this like that, capital I, and something's wrong. What's wrong? I know what's wrong. Page directive must specify a route template. Yeah, it does. Enclosed in quotes. Edit that. I think this is the error. All right. So edit game it is. All right. And now let's just write the form, or maybe first add the parameters so we don't get any errors in the form. So first thing is the ID as a parameter, like that. And again, nope, not like that. I actually want another thing. Come on. This is what I wanted. This is our ID. And then we also need a game for our model. And this is our game from this folder here, like that. Okay. And now in case of initializing Jesus, initializing the page, this is the method we want. And here now, okay, Copilot, no, that's not correct. Override async task on initialized async, of course. And then here, what we want to do is first we need our handler. So var get handler. You see, this is how you would do it when you're not using mediator. We create a new instance of our get game by ID handler, and this thing first we need the reference, and this thing now needs a context. So let's inject our context real quick. Inject appdb context. So now we can use it here, and now down here we say game is await get handler handle, right, with our new, or with a new query where this is a record. So you really have to pay attention with Copilot. That's how we would use, or this is how the correct syntax looks like. So the difference here, this is a record, not a class. So this is why we have to write it that way. Okay, so this is now the on initialization part. So let's create our form real quick so we can maybe test this already. We use the typical edit form and say our model now is our game, and on submit, no validation for this quick tutorial. So no on valid submit. It needs a value, so we have to add the method, of course. All right, then real quick, let's add the on submit method, or handle submit method. And let me write this by myself. So private async task handle submit it is. Let me remove this. Handle submit. Okay, and here now also handle submit like that. Error's gone. This is nice. Yes, and we will implement this in a sec. But first, the actual form. We just use a div. Pretty simple stuff, right? A label as well. And this is now the title. Okay, and here now our input text with add bind value. This is correct. Game title. And let's use the form control class from Bootstrap for that. And here now another one where we say this is the genre. Also set the genre here like that. I think what's missing? Of course, the typo. Genre. It's not genre, it's genre in our case. And we need the button. Okay, so here now class, Bootstrap classes here again. like that. Button, primary it is. And here we just say save, like that. I hope this works, but we also have to check if the game, although it shouldn't be null actually, so we don't have to check that. So let's try that real quick. All right, there we are, but we have to add a game real quick. So here, let's add Super Snow Fight action game, let's say, back to the browser. There we are. And now with edit and then one, yeah, we see our game. Perfect. But nothing is happening here. We see the post request doesn't specify which form is being submitted. To fix this, ensure form elements have a form name attribute with a unique value or pass a form name. Now this is Blazor SSR in this case, right? Because we haven't specified the render mode already. So this is what you see if you just want to use Blazor static server-side rendering. We could do that as well, but in our case now, let's just use Blazor server. Why not? But again, we have to add the render mode. But it's nice to see the error. So now you know. Anyways, back to Visual Studio. There it is. And here now in our handle submit, let's finish the implementation. So what I want to do here is first get the edit handler again, which is a new edit game handler with the given context. And now await edit handler handle. This looks good with the genre again. So edit handler, handle, edit game commands. Perfect. I know we don't have any feedback here. We don't see, did this work? Something like that. Yeah, but again, short tutorial, hopefully. But now the render mode. So here now, this shall be interactive server. We restart the application. All right, we can also go back here. We see the data. And now let's say this is actually a co-op action game. Save this. No feedback, but when we reload and check in the database, we see now this is a co-op action game. Isn't that nice? So this is a really quick introduction into vertical slice architecture with Blazor Server. I hope you liked it. Don't forget, you can download the complete source code with the link in the video description. Maybe you also want to join the .NET Web Academy if you want to dive deeper into stuff like that. Blazor.net. You know what I mean? And otherwise, I can only say thank you very much for watching. I hope we see each other next time in the next video. Would love to hear your comments about Blazor and VSA. See you next time. Take care.